I mean, I could probably sit here for 2 hours and ask Caleb a bunch of questions because I've learned a lot from Lance and kind of their approach on things, and he's helped steered me into this is what works and what hasn't, and I've learned a lot from that. Caleb kind of takes this like fast lane approach to things to a whole other extreme that, you know, we're scratching our heads on some things like how could we do it that fast?
Oh yeah, Caleb comes right in with that. Welcome to the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, I'll be joined by a rotation of co-hosts, Caleb Chamberlain from OSH Cut, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Thrailkill from All Metals Fabricating. Together, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Discover your path to leadership excellence at the FMA annual meeting, February 25th to the 27th in Chandler, Arizona. This premier event offers a unique opportunity to connect with prominent figures in the fabrication and metals industries, enabling the exchange of ideas, collaborative solutions to business challenges, and the cultivation of strategic relationships. Visit fmamfg.org for all the details. And now, back to the episode.
Thank you so much for joining us for this next edition of Next Gen Metal Fab. And today I am joined by a wider panel than usual. Beyond just Caleb Chamberlain, we're now talking with several folks. So I'll let them go around and introduce themselves and kind of give them a quick background of their business and where they're coming from.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us, Tim. I am Lance Thrailkill, and I'm the third generation owner of a sheet metal fabricator called All Metals Fabricating. We're located in the DFW Metroplex here in Texas, and we specialize in sheet metal, machining, welding, powder coating, and assembly, including electrical assembly. The company's been around since 1953, and in my family since 1978.
Cody, why don't you introduce yourself and where you guys are coming from?
Appreciate the opportunity. Name's Cody Lee, CEO, owner of Everyday Technologies out of the Sydney, Ohio area. So we're about 30 minutes north of Dayton. We're a sheet metal fabricator as well. So we do, laser form, weld, powder coat, assembly. We have some stamping capabilities as well. And we also have a sister company called Everyday Wire Technologies where we do wire harness and cable assemblies as well. So both of those are located out of here at Sydney. I purchased the business 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. Prior to that, Everyday has been around for close to 100 years in some shape or form. But the owners previous to me owned it for about 25 years. So I've stepped into the business and kind of taken it from there.
All right. And then finally, Caleb Chamberlain of OSH Cut. He's been with us before, but just to refresh everybody's memory, bring me through quickly how you got into this business.
Caleb Chamberlain at OSH Cut. We're based out of Spanish Fork, Utah. Opened 6 years ago. We've really focused in on the high mix, low volume market. We ship all over the United States, and we tend to absorb the smaller jobs that most shops are less equipped or less interested in handling. We'll take a prototype job online. Our software handles everything automatically, and we'll ship with lead times as quick as same day. And that's where we've optimized around. We don't do any production work, but we do the high mix stuff really effectively.
Yeah. And, the reason why I've called, that we're all sitting together is because, again, this is called Next Gen Metal Fab. This is about kind of the new generation of shop managers, shop owners, just getting into the business. And so, Cody, just kind of bring me through a centuries old shop. So, what's the history behind Everyday Technologies and how did it launch?
Yeah, so I believe the start date was 1928. It was called Everyday Manufacturing back in those days. Really where they got their start was making several different product lines for chicken coops of all things. So I guess the story is back in those days, it was pretty common for folks that have chickens in their backyard. So whether that be the chicken coops or the troughs that they would feed out of, a lot of galvanized different materials. And so I've actually got in my office that was handed down to me several catalogs from back in those early days. And so, yeah, that's pretty much where it got its start. And then essentially from there on until probably I would say early 90s, was pretty much just evolved into a job shop. So where we live in Sydney, particularly Shelby County, it's pretty dense manufacturing. So we've got, Honda engine plant here, as well as, Airstream, Copeland, or Emerson. several different large OEMs that really just kind of sparked a bunch of different smaller manufacturers back in the day to help support those, whether it be through tier 1, 2, or 3. And so, we kind of lived off that for a long time. And then, like I mentioned, 25 years ago or so, the owners previous to me, was two brothers. They acquired the business, and they'd owned and operated businesses in the past. And they were really responsible for kind of graduating to more of the contract manufacturing, servicing, direct to OEM production type work. And so they grew some accounts in that regard over those years. And then by the time I got into the picture, we had grown quite a bit, acquired some smaller businesses, and and then we're pretty much, I don't want to say exclusively OEM production work. We're starting to dabble into some more prototype, quick turn production, but yeah, that's really the evolution there over the last 90 so years.
When did you buy the business?
So it would have been August of 2021, so just over 3 years ago.
So the question is, why? Why metal fab? Your family doesn't have a history in metal fab.
Trying to make a long story short, I mean, like most people, I've always been really interested in owning a business, and that's, pretty high level to say that, and not a lot of people really understand what that means. I mean, it sounds like a sexy thing to say, but obviously there's a lot more involved that I've learned in the last 3 years and what that really meant at the time. But how I landed on sheet metal, it was really just a coincidence. So 5 or 6 years ago, Everyday Technology did a 40,000 square foot building addition. And so the general contractor I was working at the time, of course, did that addition for him. That contractor had, they've done a lot over the years. It's kind of their bread and butter to do, to service industrial markets, whether it be building expansions, building pits for large stamping presses, things like that. So I really got pretty involved with, those types of companies, and really was intrigued with manufacturing as a whole. So, that was kind of how I got turned on to the business early on. How I landed specifically on Everyday. So my family kind of indirectly does have some direct ties to manufacturing. My father-in-law owned and operated a fresh cut produce manufacturing business for about 30 years. Him and his brother started it back in 1988 here in Sydney, Ohio. And basically what they would do is they would take their raw material would be, romaine lettuce out of the field out in California or Arizona. And they would, cut that, bring it to Sydney, clean it, process it, package it, and then their end customer would be like a Panera Bread. In fact, that was their biggest customer. And so they grew that from 0 to 130 million plus in revenue by the time they sold it in 2016. So just talking to him and really kind of being a sponge around him as much as I could as it related to just business in general. But obviously manufacturing is manufacturing. You bring, raw product in and you outspits a finished good, and everything that happens in between could be specific to that industry, but more or less the same. So we talked through that. I kind of, explained to him, this is my desire to do one day. And basically what he said is, I'm not going to just buy a business for you, but if you find the right opportunity, I'll definitely help you navigate what that would take to get done. And that's pretty much what he did. So in 2020, early 2020, I reached out to the owners of Everyday Technologies. I had a mutual connection that just kind of worked there. So they got me introduced, and basically I said, hey, I'm interested in buying your business if you were looking to sell. And I knew they were, in their mid 60s or later. So if anything, they'd be opportunistic at the idea. So they didn't know me. They knew my father-in-law just because he was kind of, involved in the community throughout the area. And basically said, if you could show proof of funds, we'll engage in an LOI process and kind of take it from there. And so I did that. And, of course, this was right at the beginning of COVID. So that prolonged everything way longer than it should have been. So we didn't end up closing until probably over a year later.
Yeah.
But that's, so, I mean, it wasn't really like I went to set out to find sheet metal. I could end up in plastics or anything else. It just so happened to be that this is the opportunity that worked out, and I've come to love it.
There you go. All right. Well, Lance, you're coming from the traditional family background as far as multi-generational shop, but kind of give me the history of All Metals as far as where your family's coming from, what it used to be, and what it is today.
So my grandfather, he and two of his brothers, all three had sheet metal shops in Dallas, and one of his brothers still does. So, we've taken pictures together where there'd be like 300-400 years worth of sheet metal experience, like just in our family. It's pretty cool. But my grandfather and several other people that have worked here or work here currently were working for AC Horn, which is over 100-year-old company that actually just sold last year. They were mostly in like food processing equipment.
Yeah.
And so he'd worked there. He was the foreman, GM, and worked his way up and just wanted to provide for his family and set, future generations up for success. And so he went off and acquired All Metals through an SBA loan back in 1978. And he fired their biggest account, the one that they used to like sell the business. They were making like Greyhound benches for Greyhound, like as you wait for the bus. And he built them one time, figured out they weren't making, or thought they weren't making money on it, and canceled the contract, and was still able to quadruple the sales in the first year. So he's a workhorse. It's the great generation. They built this country with their bare hands. And so my dad joined him later that first year. He was an owner of a sporting goods store and had to wind that up, and went on to join my grandfather. And they really rode the wave of the telecom boom, especially in Dallas. There's a big telecom hub in the 80s and 90s. And so that really built the business up significantly. 2000, of course, Y2K, all the telecom companies had purchased double what they need for duplicity, and then they didn't need double anymore. So that was the same year that we moved into our building in Allen, just north of Dallas. And so we lost, I think it was 50 or 60% of our sales overnight while moving into a new building and buying our first laser. And so, it was, that's the only year we've ever fortunately had layoffs. And in our 46 years of owning it in our family. And that's mostly due to God's provision, but also, partly also our model of, and I can talk more about that later, but, we allow employees to work a lot of overtime and try to keep a lean staff. So it allows us to be more flexible. And then in the past 10 years, we've been focusing more on utilizing automation to be able to ramp up and ramp down without having to, hire and lay off as many people. And so, in 2000, we started diversifying a lot and started serving virtually every industry. We moved across the street from a medical device company. And so we started building all of their parts. And really just now we serve virtually every industry. I would say OEMs is the biggest, but within OEMs, there's a bunch of different industries. And I'd say that right now, alternative energy is our biggest, specifically in the wind energy sector. And then battery storage as well included in that. And then after that, telecom is still one of our biggest industries as well. It's like 25% of our business. But we serve virtually every industry, aerospace, as I mentioned, medical, railway. I mean, you name it, we're in it. Really, what's been really big the last year is data center work.
Oh yeah, data center work. Yeah, among many other fab shops doing that as well. It's a very hot industry in the past few years, especially. But you're no longer what was it, 80 or 90% telecom in the back in the day?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've diversified a lot. And then, something I started, my grandfather and my dad had always just looked to serve our customers with excellence. So that meant like, we added a machine shop back in the 90s. We bought a powder coating business in the early 2000s. There was wet paint at the time, transitioned into powder coating. And so they were trying to really be a full service solutions provider for our customers. And that really is more of a contract manufacturer. When I came in 16 years ago, really started branding that, more as a contract manufacturer, and just taking on them, introducing as much automation as we can, to get really higher volume production work. And, with the wave of inshoring, back in 2016, 17, 18, that certainly helped. It's been a great ride, very enjoyable journey.
Right. All right. Now, Caleb, for something completely different. bring everybody through your story. I know some folks, some listeners of the podcast probably heard it before, but just to refresh everybody's memory, kind of bring us through how you came from the industry you came from and how you ended up in sheet metal.
Yeah, well, first, I feel like I'm in August company, whether because of personal experience or just longevity of the company. Lance, the idea that your grandfather bought your business in 1978, and it's been in the family since, and just like, wow, the amazing history there and the body of knowledge, and that's so incredible.
Thank you.
And Cody, I read in Tim's article that when you joined the company, they were operating on a CO2 machine with 150,000 hours on the resonator.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I've actually
Incredibly annoying.
Yeah, I've wondered whether modern machines will have that kind of longevity. I think our fiber lasers like run Windows under the hood. I'm sure anything with Microsoft's brand on it has 150,000 hours of longevity, but we'll find out, I guess. Actually, I'm an electrical engineer. My brother's a manufacturing engineer, and we've always had kind of side projects, he and I. The one that ended up leading into OSH Cut was a virtual reality motion simulator where you put on a headset and then you're sitting on this motion activated chair, basically, that'll rotate you up to 45 degrees, which is a lot when you're sitting on it. You really feel that. Anyway, you're flying an airplane and it's moving with you and simulating the motion. A lot of fabricated metal parts in there, but we were exactly the wrong kind of job for local shops, at least. These were one-offs, you never turn into production, financed or paid for by individuals, not businesses. So we just really couldn't get the time of day for good reasons. But we thought, hey, there's probably a better way to do this for this type of work. So we started OSH Cut specifically to solve that problem. We do instant quoting, and we've built the entire software stack vertically to support the operation from quote to DFM online, to production, scheduling, purchasing, the ERP backend. So end to end, it's all our tool, and that allows us to do thousands of orders every week, which is a lot of fun.
Right. And it's obviously, the low quantity model where it's you handle the long tail, so to speak, of a lot of orders that never see the light of day. And otherwise, and you said the majority of orders you don't see again, right?
That's right. 90% of the parts that we see, we will never see again. Simultaneously, 90% of our revenue is from repeat customers.
Right.
So they come back and order, but they're not ordering the same parts. And I think when it comes down to doing actual production, we do some of that, but ordinarily it requires more high-touch sales and relationships than we're structured to handle. When you have tens of thousands of customers, it's just kind of hard to have a relationship with all of them. So they find an outlet elsewhere when they need to get to the contract manufacturing front.
Right.
Maybe me and Cody can arm wrestle for your contacts.
I'll gladly be a sponsor to the website if that's what it
Well, we'd be happy to send people your way. We actually get requests all the time for higher touch service that we just can't handle. We send people to local shops.
Lance, I want to riff off one of the comments you made about, the ramping up and down, to being able to do that without, while keeping your staff, while being able to keep lean. During my years of covering this industry, I think that has been the greatest challenge for a lot of shops. Obviously, revenue concentration has been a historical challenge for a lot of shops, because it's easy to grow on the back of several large accounts. You can buy a lot of expensive machines that way, and you can just grow with serving this one account with the large quantity orders. That's how you turn into contract, and you have a long tail of smaller quantity work. But your bread and butter is that contract work. And yet, when things go south, everything goes haywire, and layoffs ensue. And an industry that is always looking to break those the barriers when it comes to hiring. Obviously, layoffs are the last things that new workers want. So Lance, just kind of bring me through, your philosophy of scaling up and down now, how automation allows you to do that, and kind of the history behind that as far as how, what you're trying to avoid, the lessons learned over time.
Yeah, so I think it really started with my grandfather took, the idea that they had at AC Horn was a 15% profit share of 401k. And so it really started with that and just this whatever it takes mentality to which is one of our core values that he instilled and still is very well, who we are today, where people, just want to work to get the job done as much as they can. And most shops, understandably so, from as you look at the financials, just makes sense to have, limit people's hours, have multiple shifts, and hire and lay off as you need to. What I believe, and I was fortunate to, inherit this model that they'd already set up was that, the cost of hiring is much higher than people realize. It's indirect costs. Laying off, you're paying, unemployment taxes, every paycheck on every person. That's a lot of times not factored in, as you're looking at, how to think about that. And so, like, our unemployment rate is the lowest it can possibly be. And so just having this model where it allows the employees to make more, they can work, we have a flex shifts. Our shift is 7 to 3:30, but they can come in as early as 5 and stay as late as they want, as long as there's, somebody else they're working with them. We do have kind of a skeleton second shift and then a second shift in our paint shop. So, um, you know, areas and in weld, so areas where it is more manual processes, specifically paint, powder coating, you gotta have that second shift, but, we started our first purchase of automation was, a laser with a 2 tower system and automated, offloader, and so that really in 2016 after that election, we went from like we were really down and we were like 800,000, we went from 800,000 in November to like 1.5 in January or February. And so we doubled, and we only hired a few people. And so that laser really allowed us to be able to ramp up quickly and just showcased, okay, there's something to this. And so we started adding automation. We added that same year, I believe it was, an auto loader unloader to one of our punch presses, and have since added a laser punch combo with auto load and unload and a automated bend cell as well. We also have a panel bender that has auto load, and we're working on the auto offload right now. And so, our goal is to have automation in every department in the next few years. And so we can just be able to, run around the clock. And the idea is use the automation to help you stay caught up. And when things slow down, you just don't use the automation as much. The only I'd say I don't want to say problem, but something me and Cody were just talking about the other week is, you become with automation, you become so dependent on it. And so when something goes down and with the new equipment now, it's so electrically based that there's just so many opportunities for breakdowns, that when it does go down, you're hurting that much worse. So like last month we had, all three, our 2 lasers and our laser punch combo all go down at one point. And so it crippled our sales for the month. But anyways, so that's kind of the downside of it. Just want to be, fully transparent with that as you depend more on automation, when it does break, it is, that much more crippling, especially if you're busy. If you're not, then it's not as big of a deal. But we are certainly busy. Thank God for that.
So Cody, what has been your philosophy toward automation in the last few years? You just took over the business a few years ago. What was the state of automation then, and kind of what's your philosophy moving forward?
Obviously I see the importance of it, and you go to these fab tech shows and it's like kid at a candy store until you realize everything's millions of dollars. So they're all luxury type items. So you kind of have to balance reality with what makes the most sense for your business. But yeah, I can agree with everything that Lance has said there. So when I first came into the business, I would say and it's still kind of true to this day, so to speak, but from an automation standpoint, blanking in both turrets and lasers is where the majority of our automation happens. And so when I got here, as Caleb had mentioned, we had a really old laser. So we call them lasers 1, 2, and 3. And it's just, we have 3 lasers out on the shop floor. So when I got here, all 3 of them were CO2, the oldest one being close to 20 years old with 150,000 plus hours on the resonator. But lasers 1 and 2 were tied to a material tower. And, when it worked, it was great because, you could run off shift. And, if you've ever had to go from that type of automation, especially load and unload, to let's get a jib crane over here because we have none of that anymore. It's down, and now you're doing it all by hand. You really start to feel the pain pretty quick. Our material tower went down. It was an older piece of equipment, and basically what ended up doing was, it shut us down completely for a while. So our new laser that we had just bought. So by the way, we replaced that old laser pretty soon after I got here 2.5 years ago, and it's a 10K fiber laser. So this thing's really, really fast compared to the technology that we had up till then. And so, to not have any piece of automation on the backside of it didn't really make a whole lot of sense because this thing's cutting so fast. And so basically the material tower goes down. We lose all of our automation while we're trying to figure this out. And it basically, quadrupled our cycle time between cut sheets and created a huge backlog and a lot of upset customers that we had to navigate through several months until we kind of landed with plan B. So anyways, what we ended up doing there is we just, we went to a material mover on the backside of our laser that's not tied to a material tower. And we found that we didn't have to make the $800,000 investment, and we could still get our cycle time with not having to hire anybody. It was just a luxury that we've had for many, many years, and figured we had to have it to keep going, and we've learned to live without it. So we're kind of semi-automated in that regard. But other than that, all of our press brakes, welding, powder coat, we do have an automated powder coat line, so there's some automation there. But generally speaking, we don't have the automated press brake or robotic welding and things like that. And so it's as nice as a lot of those things sound from my perspective. There's obviously a cost benefit with any of those things that you want to invest in. I'm sure, Lance, they went through some sort of study or maybe had a particular part that was high enough volume that justified that investment. But for us, historically, our volumes haven't been such that I can spend money on an automated press brake, at least today. I'm not saying next year that opportunity won't make sense, but it's really just been balancing like what's really going to solve a point here or a pain point for us in our business with automation, and then what just looks like the next cool thing.
Right.
As I mentioned, going to Fab Tech, you really get exposed to it all, and you're just like, that'd be great, that would be great, that would be great. But it's a price tag adds up quite a bit. So I mean, I certainly believe that automation has its place in every shop in some shape or form. But for us, it's just been balancing, the cost benefit of doing that. And like Lance said, I mean, even fast forward to this year, another kind of chapter in my book has been, seeing what the economy's doing and the pullback that we've had from a lot of our customers, that they're in products a pretty expensive piece of capital equipment. So as interest rates rise and people become unsure about what the election's doing and all that, you start to see that pullback. And for a lot of these OEM contract work that we're so accustomed to, scaled back their demand quite a bit. And that kind of put us in what do we do? And I mean, I could probably sit here for 2 hours and ask Caleb a bunch of questions, because I've learned a lot from Lance and kind of their approach on things. And he's helped steered me into, hey, try this and don't do this, and this is what works and what hasn't. And I've learned a lot from that. But Caleb kind of takes this like prototype and fast lane approach to things to a whole other extreme that, we're scratching our heads on some things like, how could we do it that fast? And I'm just like blown away that OSH Cut's able to figure that out. So, I guess bottom line is this year, it's forced us to kind of find work elsewhere, which is in the prototype and kind of rapid production world. And we've had some success with that, specifically in the data center arena that Lance was talking about. But it's funny, automation doesn't just have to mean out on the floor with physical equipment. There's automation to be had kind of in the front office, so to speak, too, that I think could be talked about.
Oh yeah, Caleb comes right in with that. So kind of describe your pipeline and how it fit, how it kind of has shaped your business, Caleb. Just kind of contrasting it with the other folks here on the panel.
Yeah, Cody would be happy to chat anytime offline. Pretty open about what we're doing and love to see. I think there's honestly, I think there's tons of work to do, and there's tons of modernization that needs to happen in U.S. manufacturing to make us more competitive globally. And I think it's happening right now. And I like to think that maybe we can all together accelerate that trend. So yeah, happy to chat anytime.
Cool. Appreciate
Uh,
that.
yeah, you mentioned software automation. So all these, we don't have any material uh, storage automation. We're picking material off shelves with forklifts. We don't have any loading systems on our lasers. In fact, I remember one old hand from one of the laser manufacturers came in during an install and he was like beside himself. He was like, "You can't have a laser like this without a loading tower." Um, we actually just use suction lifters and unpowered bridge cranes to load, and it actually works pretty well. Especially when you can just like have the machine cutting and then manually load either multiple remnants or full sheets. So no automation to speak of on that front. All our automation's software and front office. In fact, we have zero quoting staff. We have no full-time purchasing personnel. We kind of have one guy that does all the laser programming and purchasing together, and it's not even a full-time job. And that's just because well, we found out quickly that when you expose instant quoting through a website online, which is, by the way, it's kind of an easy problem to solve. The problem that you then have is, I guess, what you wanted, which was anyone on the internet can order parts from you. Um, and it might be an order for one part, or it might be an order for 1,000 unique parts with different quantities of each. And somehow you've got to manage all that. So like 95% of our software efforts has been trying to figure out how to deal with that kind of demand. And that's included purchasing automation and receivables automation, scheduling and nesting. Our software actually programs the lasers and the press brakes and does the DFM. So when a part comes in, our system generates all the production programs for it right then and there. And if it doesn't work for some reason, it just doesn't accept the work. It tells the user, the customer, why. And then the first time we see a part, it's sitting in a nest on a material sheet that we have in stock, just for our guy to review and maybe tweak, and then hit go, and it jumps out to the lasers, and then production takes it from there. So pretty automated.
Is that automation programming for the equipment? Is that in-house software as well, or are you using like the OEM's dedicated software?
It's all ours. We started with the OEMs, their software, but we found it was a full-time job just to download part files and import them into the software and fix glitches and
Right.
get it to program right, just with the high volume of unique part numbers. So we wrote all that in-house too. Actually, programming lasers is quite easy. It's just G code and it's all two-dimensional.
Right.
The press
That was fascinating. I mean, you'd say it like it's nothing, but building a post for a machine is a massive undertaking. So, and I'm guessing that's all built into your ERP system as well. That's all one system.
It's all one system. And yeah,
Unbelievable.
we have some smart people. We've got 4 full-time software devs that are all quite smart. So we've replaced like the normal office staff with like software developers to build our tools. It's an interesting kind of mix. I think 'cause we're actually very much a software company, but the customer is ourselves. So we're this amalgam of a tech company plus a normal manufacturer. I think that's becoming more and more common too. As you'll see more and more companies doing that, but it allows you to just build tools that are a perfect fit for your shop. Um, and like nothing off the shelf, I don't think. I mean, maybe you could duct tape, multiple software platforms together and get 60, 70% of the way there. But um, I've thought before that the way we do business just wouldn't be possible without an in-house software team. I
Right.
just think that it's just too hard to try to manage all the unique parts and yeah.
Do you see yourself spinning that idea off and because like even what you're describing there on the automation on the front end, everything from purchasing to nesting lasers and press brake programs and all that stuff. I mean, obviously, myself, Lance included, and every other sheet metal fabricator, those are things that we have to do as well, whether it be at a different scale or not. But no matter if you're cutting 20 parts a month or 200,000 parts a month, you still have to do all those activities. Is that something that you guys think, well, hey, we've mastered something here, or we continue to like hone in on this homegrown process that you could go to market separately with just that in itself?
Tell us your software, please.
That's a roundabout way of saying it.
You know, we get that question a lot, especially from potential investors. They see the software product. The challenge is that I think our software is like a perfect fit for us, and we've had the benefit of not having to generalize it to support every other operations workflows. So probably it flat out just wouldn't work for you, just by virtue of the fact that like, it's a different, we do business a very particular way. So like, it's a hard sell to come up to try to sell someone software and say, well, you have to do business our way.
Right.
And-
And what, because you had talked about the pipeline approach you have where the product has to be a certain way. The DFM, it gives DFM suggestions, but it bats it back to the customer saying you have to make the change. It's a self-serve environment. It's not a hand-holding, hey, why don't we try this or that and let's increase manufacturability holistically, which is what a lot of other fab shops, in particular, because your cut bend, you do not have weld yet, correct?
We've done some welding kind of on the side, but we haven't. It's hard to automate quoting for welding.
Yes, and same with assembly, I assume, too. So if you have sub-assembly and when you get to that level of production, it's hard to automate that at present.
Yeah, the way to look at it is we just take cut, bend, some various ancillary operations like hardware insertion, tapping, powder coating. So we just do that generic slice of value. If it requires anything outside that generic slice, we just have to say no because we don't have any engineering staff or sales staff to provide that customer back and forth hands-on relationship. So something as simple as like, hey, I just want this little rib welded onto this little part, and it might be super simple, but like we just can't do it. It's possible to generalize it, but in the end state, I think there's probably two different ways that people are going to continue to grow their businesses. I've talked and wrote about this a lot, but either you go turnkey, high touch, vertically integrated inside one industry or a handful of industries, and solve a customer's problem really, really well, which I think is kind of the realm that you guys have been in. Or you expand horizontally across lots of industries and you serve lots of customers in that space. And I think that whole like generic service at scale across all industries, I think the end state in a couple or a few decades is that there will be like 3 or 4 companies doing that. And so that's the real answer to why don't you sell software is I think our particular software, which enables that work, will have a market of 3 companies in 20 years. And everybody else will have scaled more vertically
Right.
with higher touch sales, which is great. You can also use software to optimize one particular vertical really, really well. So I think you'll probably start. I mean, you talked about data center stuff. There's probably software that could be written to streamline the quoting process for custom server racks or whatever.
Right. Like for a specific value stream, like if you scale up a specific value stream, it could be your own mini business with the software attached to that value stream.
That's right. Or a mini business. I mean, if you get really good at solving one particular need, then because you've integrated technology, whether it's physical automation or software automation, then you'll just tend to soak up that work because you're just better at it.
Right.
And a company like mine who serves all industries will never compete in that value with that niche. The niche might be $500 million, but that niche being that particular service, which is really good.
Yeah. So, Lance, what's your plan for scaling over the coming years as far as your core industries, how you're going to that vertical high touch environment that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the model of just steady growth, slow, steady growth, 5-10% a year. This year we had a pretty big jump, and it was really challenging. And so we never had the staff for second shift, and getting a second shift stood up and staffing for it was a lot more challenging than we anticipated. And so yeah, I've had enough of the quick, rapid growth, and want to get back to, just slow, continual, steady growth, which is what we've been built off of for 46 years now. But yeah, just continuing to serve all the different industries, looking for, we really focused on alternative energy with the Anti-Inflation Act. I put that in air quotes, because I say that because it was really a green energy bill. And it was like, hey, there's a lot of opportunity there. Let's go after that.
And beat inflation by spending more money, right? That's gonna work.
Yeah, and then, also with the data centers, just, seeing the opportunity there. Specifically, we really started out in Bitcoin mining equipment, which is essentially just data centers, and now that customer has grown into developing AI data centers. But one thing I wanted to touch on earlier, and I think these guys, did well, is just, to other shops too. It's just, you can automate really anything, and it's a lot less expensive to automate quoting. I mean, what Caleb has done is absolutely fascinating. I mean, just each part of what he's built in his software is fascinating. I mean, scheduling is our biggest challenge, from a software perspective. I mean, just last week or 2 weeks ago, me and Cody were talking about how can we automate our programming better, and talking through strategies there. They've already done it, and so, but that's things, even simple things like automating invoicing. We do a batch invoicing where it just emails it out to everybody. Just little things that you can do to automate, and estimating is a really, specific skill set, that requires a lot of knowledge. And so being able to estimate, automate estimating as much as you can. I mean, that was transformational for us, when, we saw, material spikes back in 2021. We were having to requote. We're 90% repeat work, and we don't ever have to requote that typically because material pricing has been flat for the past decade prior to that. And for the most part, and we were having to requote every job. And if we didn't have automated quoting software, for the new stuff, at least, I mean, whereas most beneficial and most time consuming, it would have been crippling for us. So just, I think there's a lot to, these, automating and different, not having everything tied together into a fully integrated automated system. That's obviously attractive, like Cody was talking about. But those are really more for OEMs. And so how can you automate individual cells where you're not so handicapped if something goes down? So, we're really looking into, we wanted to get some cobots going in our welding department this year. But we really need the guys to be bought in on it. And so we just haven't been able to free them up enough with how behind we've been all year to go spend the time to get the buy-in from them. So that's something we're looking. I've been working with Hager on they've finally come out with a fully automated PIM inserter. That's something that, you've really got to have some unique work for, but I think they're going to be continuing to make that more user friendly. We saw that early on with the press bed automation. It really required high volume, but now, the new systems are so user friendly that you can really have a lower mix. So, we're looking at how to automate a little bit more simply without having to go, spend millions of dollars on a system.
Right, right. What's interesting is, one big takeaway I had from this year's FabTech was is interesting. I saw a few vendors who had the ultra wideband job location technology, and had an interesting kind of thought experiment with one of the vendors, and actually one of the shop owners who was at the booth. He said, "All right, what if?" Because we've been always obsessed with machine uptime and asset tracking, but the machine doesn't make money. The parts do. The shipped parts do. No matter how much that machine is on, it doesn't matter. As long as it's available, it needs to be available. That's the key. That otherwise, yeah, it has to be available. It has to be in pristine shape. It has to be reliable. It has to produce when you say you want it to produce. But parts on the move, that's what's important to keep it flowing throughout the whole shop. And also jobs on the move, from estimating all the way to receiving, right? Receiving cash for the job. So what he said was, well, how about this job tracking software where I could track it and see the dot? It's like a traffic pattern on the shop floor, and you see the velocity of the jobs. And I don't care about asset utilization. I care about asset availability. And he says, if there's a traffic jam in front of the brake, what's going on? If there's a traffic jam in front of outer coating, what's going on? And there's an issue, and so he would use that as the feedback loop for improvement, for scheduling, for everything. And I just thought that was interesting because we track everything except the jobs. We track everything in a machine, but often it's a black box as far as where jobs stand exactly and what's causing the backup. And is there a way we can release it later to the floor? Because if we release it later to the floor, you don't have the rework because there was a change to the job. Why did we release it so early? So the later you can release it, the better. All these things. So anyway, so Cody, have you kind of what kind of front office automation, Cody, have you implemented in the last few years, or are looking to implement? What do you think from a generic sense? How what the greatest opportunity is for everyday technologies?
Yeah, so quite a bit recently. I'm on my third year into this, so every year I just learn a little bit more, and I've been fortunate to make relationships like Lance and some other folks that have kind of exploited me to some of these things that exist out there because, you come into a business and you think, well, we just need to go buy equipment and do all these things to be able to take on work. But it's like, you don't really sit there and think about, well, first of all, what's your strategy of getting the work, right? You got this great equipment, but how are you going to get work on it? And then once you even get that opportunity, you don't even think about the bottleneck that's going to exist next, which is how quick can you quote it and how quick can you program it and ultimately get it out to the floor. And as I'd mentioned earlier, this challenge that we had this year with some of our larger OEMs scaling back and bringing in all this, some of it's project work, some of it's just rapid production type work, but nonetheless, it requires quick turns relative to the contract work that we have. And so it really exploited some of the upfront challenges that we had in our office as it relates to workflows from, hey, here's this RFQ to cut this part. Lance and I have talked quite a bit about this specifically, but just two areas on that front is paperless parts. I'll name drop them because they've been fantastic. So I think we're on our third or fourth week of implementation of the software. So but we've already even started using it kind of at a high level as we continue to quote parts. I would say in the last couple of years we probably average maybe 10 to 20 parts that we're quoting, whether that be one package of 20 parts or 20 different parts from 20 different customers. But point being is that the volume there wasn't so crazy because we're just kind of always quoting a little bit more for our current customers. And so kind of once we've opened the floodgates, so to speak, we went from that to like quoting, hundreds of parts a week. And the timeline on those might be 2 to 3 weeks. And so even if we can quote them really quick, we've got to get them programmed through our lasers and press brakes. And that just was like, oh my gosh, like this is a whole new problem. So paperless parts is going to help solve the problem of quoting. It already has. And so I'm excited to see where that gets us here in early February when we go live with it. And then on the programming side, again, like Lance said, I'd be curious to know more about Caleb's approach to that. But we're working specifically, whenever I bought the business, we had one OEM's lasers and another OEM's press brakes. So two different pieces of equipment from a manufacturing standpoint. But the softwares that we have to have, they don't talk to each other. It's like Apple and Microsoft, right? They have these closed ecosystems where they intentionally don't want you to talk to each other. So you're kind of forced into one of their worlds. But with that in mind, we've basically have upgraded in some of their softwares, and it's taken us from a pretty archaic approach to, okay, you've got this great, you're programming a press brake, a formed part, and you've got this kind of 3D rendering in front of you that shows the press brake and the tooling and your tooling library and all that stuff. But our guys were still manually selecting all the tooling and then setting the sequencing of how you're going to run the part. I'm like, we were just getting done closing with paperless parts, and I'm like, this is silly. Like, it's 2024. They've got all this great AI and back-end information on how to quickly program or quote a part. You're telling me in 2024 I can't automate my programming with this software? I mean, this is ridiculous. And this wasn't anyone's fault except our own, just for not trying to look into that more. So, made some calls, and long story short, we upgraded our software, and of course there was those features, and it's not perfect. Probably the same reason Caleb has to turn away some work, because there's some DFM issues that this flange is too short or whatever the issue is, right? That is going to take this programming software from saying like, yep, it's programmed, to, hey, you need to have a programmer look into this and tweak some things. Can be the difference of, your I guess your throughput of being able to do those things. But nonetheless, it sped up the process quite a bit for us. So we're addressing those two things specifically. One thing I wanted to ask probably more pertains to Lance than Caleb, but at least for us, one of the things that kind of separates us from a lot of folks who do sheet metal, for all you guys that are in the industry, when you say you're a sheet metal fabricator, there's such a large spectrum there. It's the guy that's doing it out of his garage, and then there's the $500 million a year company that's doing it, right? That's got plants all over the United States and Mexico, and then people like myself and Lance, and then guys like Caleb, and it's just a wide spectrum. But one of the things that separates us is that the customers that we do work with, these are large OEMs that are recognizable names. They're very sophisticated, meaning they tend to be, a lot of red tape, a lot of T's that have to be crossed and I's got to be dotted, and quality audits, and basically just paperwork at the end of the day. But it's part of doing business with them. And that requires overhead that someone that Caleb may never have to address. But we have to have people on staff. It's not like we've got 10 of these guys standing around, but you've got to have people that understand that, can talk to those customers and know what that means when they come in and do a pretty intensive quality audit, right? To be able to just even quote the first part for these guys. And we're equipped to be able to do that. And that's a human resource. That's not anything else. And I don't even know if you can automate it, because it's, it's so customer by customer, but that ends up getting us, some pretty good opportunities with customers. We always say that if we bring them to our shop, that's going to win them over no matter what. And then whenever they start engaging in with us with, hey, we're going to send a supplier quality engineer, and he's going to do this, 3-tier quality audit for you. We say, well, bring it on, because we do it all the time. Versus most people say, oh crap, like, where do we even start? Now they've got to get a whole team on it, and they're just learning it. Like, we handle those things pretty good. But Lance, I don't know if you guys have those same challenges or customers like that.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, we just got done doing one from this company from Spain, and I mean, we've got very good quality, and they gave us like 22 things we needed to improve. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, we passed our ISO 9001 quality with audit last week with like one observation. That's it. So part of that was also them just not really understanding our system, and them kind of being new into this space. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly a challenge, and it seems like it's becoming more that people are doing it more and more. So I think that's a beautiful part about Caleb's business. And one thing I was thinking about too earlier, this is a little bit off topic, but like really every sheet metal shop should be a customer of Caleb's. It's like, you don't need to weld it together. We can weld it together, and the beautiful thing about assemblies is on a prototype, most time the customer's wanting to assemble it themselves anyways. So as long as you can do, PIM insertion, which you can, that's a great feature.
Or why buy another laser if Caleb can just use his capacity, right?
Yeah, exactly. I like when we get off this call, I'm gonna certainly email our sales team that, hey, OSH Cut, use it when you need a quick turn. But that's such a unique niche.
We do a lot of that actually. We serve a lot of fab shops that aren't equipped to do the high mix, but definitely want the production work. So yeah, the big not so secret is that I think that that's really a great place for the industry to land. If somebody can aggregate enough volume to like command direct to mill pricing, uh, like imagine if your service center can send you a blank in one day, for less than you could make it for. Like I actually think that's going to happen, but
Oh, you mean just one blank? Like not an order of volume, but just one.
well, imagine OSH Cut, but with regional presence plus its own level line and in-house material servicing and warehousing.
Right.
Well, and he's exactly right. Like the cost for us to build one, I mean, it's got to go through flat pattern inspection, programming. I mean, quality check at every step. So you can build one. Yeah, we could buy one with your profit in it, probably cheaper than we could make it. Or close to.
Right.
But we can't even touch those lead times because of our scheduling complexity.
And that's okay if you can, I mean, because you've got the overheads you haven't automated in the office, but if you can amortize those overheads across your big contract jobs, it doesn't matter at all. But yeah, for one part, it's hard to scale that up to where it makes sense at all.
Right. I mean, just to give you some perspective, a decade ago, I visited a shop called 24/7 Taylor Steel um, in Europe. This is Tim, by the way, and and when it was, they call it the web shop model in Europe, where and there it's very localized. So there's so many. They have their own trucks, and everything is closer together. And OEM they actually have a drip feed system to OEMs there, where they may deliver about 5 or 6 parts, a dozen parts every day. But it's the geography is different. Everything's closer together, and so it makes more sense. And the supply chains look a little different. But then when I saw OSH Cut and a few of the other competitors out there that are just coming, I covered we've covered SendCut Send previously as well, which has a similar business model. And I just said, wow, this kind of model is coming to the States. And and when I started covering it, because I thought, man, this model could be symbiotic with the contract model that I see everywhere in sheet metal, as well as OEMs. It could be kind of a reshaping of the supply chain between between service centers, between contract fab shops, and between prototype shops, like Proto Labs, like SendCut Send, and like OSH Cut. So it's a very interesting model. And then we have then we have models like Xometry in there as well, the brokerage model. So we have all these different models that are just kind of entering the business. We have kind of this gumbo that's happening that's beginning to taste pretty good, I think, especially when folks really start working together and going, all right, let's see how we can really use the capacity that we've got. And so that if we've got an idle machine, it should be running, ideally. I mean, and keep the parts flowing. So we shall see. So, and this is another reason why I wanted to get this panel together, because, and Cody, it was great when you mentioned this, as far as about automated programming, how the thought was just so second nature to you. Why not? It's 2024, automated programming. And so you went and upgraded, and you saw, obviously it makes sense. This is where you need to go. Where 20 years ago, when I was covering this business, I never heard that. It was all about how many inches per minute, how many strokes per minute, how fast can this machine run? It's a totally different kind of mentality with this next generation of shop managers coming up through the ranks and going, hey, there's a new way to run, and it's not batch processing, or it is a form of batch processing, but it's also about flow to get it through the entire business. So guys, thank you so much. We'll be tackling future topics and future panel discussions on Next Gen Metal Fab. I want to thank you to Lance Thrailkill of All Metals Fab, Cody Lee of Everyday Technologies, and Caleb Chamberlain of OSH Cut. And we'll see you next time.
The Next Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.
Now for something completely different.